Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, I'm going to do one of my first modern classics. And a book that most of you probably don't realize actually is one. Because I certainly didn't. So this review is going to cover actually two books. The 101 Dalmatians and the Starlight Barking, which is the second book in the series. The first one, as I'm sure most people know, has been made into a giant Disney franchise and the multiple movies. The second book nobody's touched. I can kind of understand that, and you probably will once I talk about it. It's a little weird and very, very simple. And again, very, very weird. But again, let's look at the 101 Dalmatians here. So I'm going to look at the Wikipedia page briefly to give some background information here. So it was published in 1956, which oddly enough is the year my mother was born, by Dodie Smith, and it was originally in a serialized form in Women's Day as The Great Dog Robbery, and then it was eventually turned into a book. So the story, basic story, most people know, it's the film. There's a few differences. I will actually do a video kind of comparing the two at a different point. But we're going to focus on the book. So the book focuses, it's all from the dog's point of view. So the humans are never named. They are Mr. and Mrs. Dearly. The dogs that are the main characters are Pongo and Mrs. They have 15 puppies that are kidnapped by Cruella de Vil, who wants to basically create a fur farm. So she's obsessed with furs. Now her relation to Mrs. Dearly is they went to school together. They were not friends. Obviously, Cruella was very stuck up and irritating and cruel. In fact, you find out how cruel she is from her cat, who basically says she's in, I believe Cruella actually admits this as well, she's drowned multiple litters of this cat's kittens. So, yeah, Cruella de Vil is evil. We knew this from the film. They're not exaggerating. She's very, very evil. But basically they went to school together, and for some reason she wants to find Mr. and Mrs. Dearly. Now, basically she's aware of the dogs, and for some reason she wants some connection to Mrs. Dearly because they went to school together. It's never fully explained. Now, the Dearlys are never given first names. So they are Mr. and Mrs. Dearly. That's how the dogs refer to them. The only other two human characters besides Cruella and her husband, who is a furrier. Basically, he's a guy who sells furs. So, essentially, Cruella's obsession with furs. In fact, he's one of those men who she forced him to take her family name. So, he gave up his last name to become a de Vil. And yet, he still pretty much caters to her. But besides those two are never, I don't think he's just called Mr. de Vil. I don't think he's ever given a first name either. So the other two human characters that you interact with that are adults, there is actually a child in this book, we'll get to him, are Nanny Butler and Nanny Cook. Now they were the nannies and were essentially working for Mr. and Mrs. Dearly and had been their nannies, I think, if I remember from the book. And when the Dearlys got married, they went and trained to be a cook and a butler. And these are the other two people who were in the household. So you have the two dogs and the 4 humans. And after the 15 puppies are born, the vet tells Mrs. Dearly that Mrs. is probably not going to be able to handle all 15 pups because it was a lot of puppies, which seems a little strange. I know dogs, 15 puppies is a lot, but it is not a completely unusual litter. Nevertheless, that's what the vet tells them, and she goes looking essentially for a surrogate mother, and that's how she finds Perda. And Perda has lost her puppies. She's wandering the streets. Mrs. Dearly picks her up, takes her to the vet, gets her checked out, brings her home, and basically transfers some of the puppies to her. Now, the humans believe that now Mrs. will not recognize her puppies, and she would kill them, and she's not going to like Perda at all. Pongo decides to change this. They're very much aware. Again, all of this is done from the dog's point of view. So the entire story is done from the dog's point of view. The humans are their pets. And yes, that's how they're referred to, as their pets. So Pongo basically proves the humans wrong. I think he sneaks, he keeps the door open and then brings the entire family together. So you have the 2 female dogs, the 15 puppies, and the 1 male Dalmatian. And again, all Dalmatians, thus 101 Dalmatians. So that, and then what happens essentially, as is common with the film, is Cruella shows up, looks at the puppies, wants the puppies. The Dearlys have no intention of selling any of their dogs. And then Cruella basically hires some losers to kidnap the dogs. And why the Dearlys and the adult dogs are out for a walk. And I don't know what's going on with Nanny Cook and Natalie Butler. They may be asleep at the time. So the dogs come back. Their puppies have been kidnapped. They're depressed. The Dearlys are freaking out. They're sending all over the human wires, and then the dogs start barking. And you see this in the film. And yeah, that's pretty accurate. They basically sending out, we're looking for our puppies. And so a couple days pass, the dogs are very depressed, the humans are not happy. Eventually they hear back that the puppies, along with a bunch of other puppies, are in a place in Surrey, or is it Suffolk? I believe it's Surrey. I'm going to skim through here. But the puppies are in Hellhall, which is Cruella de Vil's family home. So they find out that, it's Suffolk. Not familiar with Britain, but Suffolk is where the puppies are at. So Mrs. and Pongo decide, because they can't communicate with their humans, otherwise life would be so much easier, and they admit this. And so they decide, we're going to go get our puppies. Perta stays there to take care of the Dearlys and Nanny Cook and Nanny Butler and keep them company. So they leave. And I know Mrs. comments is that they're going to miss out on Christmas. They travel. It's not fun. And different dogs give them shelter, give them food. Sometimes there are nights where they go without food and are cold and have minimal food, and they talk about this. This is kind of thing, how depressed Mrs. is. But they eventually reach Suffolk, and they interact with a dog by the name of the General, who lives on a farm. He's the one who related to them. He found out from his friend a cat, and she had gone over to Hellhall, and she realized, oh, there's a bunch of puppies over here. This is strange. This isn't right. And with the help of the General and the cat, and oddly enough, the General's human child, obviously the child has adult parents, but the little boy Tommy, who I believe is a toddler, as part of this, he's actually him and the cat are made honorary dogs. And that comes up in the second book. So they're made honorary dogs. The little boy actually donates his little wagon to help pull some of the younger puppies. Because remember, the Dearly's puppies are still relatively young at the time. In fact, I don't even know if they have their spots quite yet. They could, but they're still really young, particularly the youngest, who came out kind of stillborn and Mr. Dearly brought back to life, which is Cadpig. And no, I'm not joking, that is the name of the cat, or the dog. I believe it's Cadpig. And yeah, she actually is a female dog. She has more importance than a Starlight barking. But so they get there, they come check on their puppies. Their puppies are still little. And the plan is to wait till they get a little bit bigger. But then Cruella shows up and tells the guys who kidnapped them, you need to kill all these puppies. Now it's, I think, remember the number. Yeah, there's 97 puppies at Hellhall. So they're rescuing everybody. So they find out, okay, they're just going to kill them after they watch their TV show. And Cadpig is obsessed with television. Again, this comes up in the Starlight barking, but they have to drag her away. And they escape. And you see their adventures Cruella comes looking for them. The 2 kidnappers come looking for them. It's like, where do these puppies go? Because there's a lot of money involved here. They end up rolling in soot to hide themselves and get various help along the way. Before they go home, they do sneak into Cruella's home with the help of her Persian cat, and they destroy all the furs. Why is this important? Because her husband doesn't actually own these furs. So essentially, by destroying everything, they bankrupt them and they run away to France. So they basically destroy that. And the Persian cat, white cat, comes and joins their family. They show up, start barking at the door. Now they're covered in soot and they're black. But eventually the door gets opened and the dogs essentially rush in and roll all over carpet revealing. We're Dalmatians. We are actually your dogs. We sound like your dogs because we are your dogs. And so they are home for Christmas. And so you have these 97 puppies, the 3 adult dogs, and then the 101 comes in when they put out an announcement kind of looking for Perta's family. But eventually her owners come up, and basically he doesn't want anything to do with her, so he sells her essentially officially to the Dearleys. Well, the Dearleys, and this is the background for Mr. Dearley, how they claim he has money. He saves Britain from being in debt. Yeah, that's basically what they do. And apparently he does this a second time, so they're giving him a bunch more money, and he doesn't have to pay taxes anymore. Yes, again, this is a book for children narrated by dogs. So that's their explanation. So they buy Hell Hall, and so they move all the dogs here. And Perta's husband, I can't remember what the heck his name is, but he ends up showing up with various owners, and he's turned over to the Dearleys because they realize he's bonded with Perta, and he has 15 pups of his own. So yeah, so we find Perta's puppies, and that's how the book ends. Essentially, everybody moves into Hell Hall because it's a huge rambling place, and you have a bunch of 4 adults and 101 Dalmatians. So it's a very cute story. It's told by the point of view of the dogs, who consider the humans their pets, who are very happy. They enjoy their humans. They go on an adventure using dog communication to essentially rescue their puppies. And it's a little bit of an adventure story. It's definitely great for children, particularly if you like dogs or you have Dalmatians or you don't. It's a really good, wholesome, fun little adventure story. I can see why it was originally put as a serial thing. It would be enjoyable to read to kids, particularly in a serial format. Definitely a great read aloud book. So again, 101 Dalmatians, very cute. Kind of different from the film. Also, the films have a tendency to put more details into the humans that you do not find in the book. Mr. and Mrs. Dearley are pretty bland, as are Nanny Cook and Nanny Butler. There's a little bit more character put into Cruella de Vil, but again, she's still kind of the characteristic evil villain. So, and yes, she does have black and white hair. So I will probably go over that in the film review. But it's a great story. I would highly recommend it if you can find it. I bought it on my ebook, on my Kindle. Actually, I rented it from my library. The Starlight Barking I bought on the Kindle because that's a little bit harder to find because it's less unknown. So let's move into the Starlight Barking. That is the second book. It has not been made into any films. It was published in 1967. So this is an interesting story. So this takes place, I'm guessing couple years later, because all the puppies are adults. Some of them have married. One of the things they bring up, that one of the puppies who has a black ear chooses not to marry, to not pass on this gene to puppies, so he becomes an uncle dog. But essentially what happens is one morning, Pongo wakes up and thinks he's woken up late because his humans aren't awake. So he wakes up, he realizes how late it is. He wakes up his wife, and they're like, something weird is going on. And they realize they're not hungry. They realize they can open doors and move really fast. Now, Cadpig, who is their youngest daughter, an interesting story with Cadpig. She becomes the minister of, the Prime Minister's dog. Now, I looked this up, and no, the Prime Minister Wilson at the time did not have a Dalmatian. It did look like there was pictures of him with a spotted Great Dane, but he did not have a Dalmatian, let alone one named Cadpig. So Cadpig is now the Prime Minister dog because she was obsessed with television and wants to be on television, and thus she is, because she is the Prime Minister's dog. So Cadpig contacts them. Somehow they're able to communicate rather than barking through basically telepathically. So all the dogs are now able to communicate telepathically. And she's like, you guys need to come. She's essentially summoning her parents because it does seem all the humans are asleep and nobody knows quite what's going on. None of the dogs are hungry. It's the other things that's pointed out. And they can suddenly move really, or swish, as they call it, very quickly rather than just kind of running. They swish where they can move almost at lightning speed or so throughout London and from Suffolk to London, which is what they end up doing. So they're trying to figure out what the heck is going on. So the first thing they think is, okay, DeVille is back in town. Let's see what's going on with her. Now, at this point, the honorary dogs, the cat that was mentioned in the first story was made an honorary dog, as strangely enough was both Tommy and the other tabby cat that was part of the generals. So they don't have as many powers and they can't swish, but they are awake. And Tommy's a little bit older now, though for some reason, I think he was a toddler in the first book. He's obviously a couple years older, so he's losing his ability to communicate with the dogs, but he gets it back in this story. So they go check out DeVille with the intent of killing her. Yes, slightly mentioned. But turns out, one, she's just as asleep as everybody else, and she's either, I can't figure out whether she's become obsessed with plastics or tin. But yeah, all her clothing is now made of not fur and plastics, and apparently her husband got into raincoats. So yes, she's not involved in this whatsoever because she's not interested in fur anymore. She's now wearing some rather uncomfortable clothing. So they find them and they don't end up, Pongo says, like, no, we cannot kill them. As much as it would be easy, as horrible as a monster as she is, we cannot kill her because she had nothing to do with this. And she's not a threat to us anymore. So what does end up happening, Cadpig is now gathering the cabinet, which is all the dogs that belong to the members of the human cabinet. And they're trying to figure out what's going on. And what ends up happening is Sirius, the dog star, is lonely. So he kind of freezes everything. Puts all the humans to sleep. And he is there to offer a proposition to all the dogs of the world. So it's not just England. They do end up getting contact with all the dogs in the world. They do mention the United States and Ireland as well. So I'm assuming they mentioned the rest of the world. But Sirius offers a proposition, is essentially, come live with me at my star and humans will forget you exist. And he explains, it's like you're owned by these people. You don't own them, you're their pets. They tell you what to do and where to go. They open doors, they can lock you up, kind of thing. And I'm giving you this great opportunity. So the decision is made that they're going to trust Pongo with this, because Cadpig thinks she's too young, and so she's going to kind of revert almost to dad, and her father seems to have the great ideas because he's the one who rescued all of the puppies. And it was his idea of how to rescue the puppies. So she trusts her father, and a lot of the other dogs trust him. And he feels uncertain about this. It's not like he wants the responsibility to make the ultimate decision for a bunch of dogs, whether or not to, including stray dogs, to give up their lives with their humans and go to the dog star. Now, so they go into the giant picture gallery, I think the British Museum, which of course Pongo wishes he could go into and have time to look at when he's not basically with the weight of the entire dog world on his shoulders. But he does mention that. But when they're in there, they have like an hour or two to make this decision. So a leader of stray dogs shows up and says, no, we don't want to go. We want a chance, even though we've had horrible owners, to have a human that loves us. It just seems a little weird, a little too loyal. But again, even Pongo is slightly confused by this. But it's like, we want a chance to find good humans and good pets, as they call them. And then a few other dogs show up. It's like, no, we don't want to do this. We want to stay here on Earth with our humans, because they in their minds, their humans need them, even though they really do now understand that they are their pets and they are controlled. So they go and tell Sirius, who had, in order to try to convince them, showed himself as all dogs. So it's also one of those things where it's like, he's the face of 1,000 dogs. How can you really trust him? So they essentially tell Sirius, it's like, no, we're not ready. Maybe at a later time. We are going to stay here with our humans. And then you have the race to get back to where they need to be and where they were when they woke up that morning, so they're not locked out because they were able to open doors and move things around. It's kind of an interesting little adventure story with this odd thing of ultimate loyalty of dogs, which is kind of interesting. The cat agreed as well. They don't want anything to do with this. Obviously, the honorary cats would be given the option, as oddly would Tommy, to join the Dog Star, and they're like, no, we do not want to do this. As much as our humans irritate us sometimes, particularly when it comes to the cats, no, they have no interest in going with the Dog Star. So they basically, the end of the story is they say no, the Dog Star goes back, is very lonely, but he goes back to wherever he is, and they have a certain amount of time to race home where they can still unlock doors and still squish so they can get where they need to be quickly. So they do this, and that's kind of the end of the story. They wake up, they get back into their beds, and understand there is a time side story where one of the cabinet dogs and Rolly, who's a large Rolly dog, he was a Rolly puppy, he became a Rolly Dalmatian, briefly go to France. Yeah, he nearly misses the boat, so to speak, on squishing and getting home. He decides to go to France and interact with the French dogs, but that's kind of a side thing. And they all get back, and they basically wake up, and it kind of, like the day never happened. And that's kind of how it ends. And the humans, with the exception of Tommy, are not part of this story at all. It's all about the dogs. It's a very cute story, similar to the 101 Dalmatians, though, as I said, I can kind of understand why they don't make a film out of it, because one, there's no humans to relate to except for a little boy by the name of Tommy who has a very minor role. It's all focused on this idea of ultimate loyalty of dogs. It might make a good animation, might make a good short. It's not a very long book, but it's a very interesting little book. So that's the Starlight Barking. I recommend it. It's a great little story. It would probably engage kids, particularly if they love dogs, because again, it's very dog centric, and it really does show some ultimate loyalty to dogs. I'm not sure the idea of even the stray dogs, like I said, even in the story, Pongo kind of questions, like, seriously, you've been abused by humans. A lot of times you're living on the street and you still don't want this. So it's an interesting concept of the ultimate loyalty of dogs. Again, similar to 101 Dalmatians, they're very cute stories, very dog-centric. So if you have children who are dog crazy, great pair of books to read. If you have kids whose favorite movie is 101 Dalmatians, both 101 Dalmatians, the book, and the Starlight Barking would probably really engage them. I think they're great books to read aloud as well. You can probably read them chapter by chapter. Even older kids might find these books kind of interesting. There's not much, with the exception of kind of the terminology of the Mr. and Mrs. The story has aged well. There's not really any politics involved. There's not really anything that's going to be talking about setting the times. Mind you, there's no real technology except for television. And there again, and particularly in the Starlight Barking, Cadpig's obsessed with television. It does tell how she becomes attached to the Prime Minister, whose apparently wife doesn't particularly like said dog, and no dogs on the furniture, but she's very attached to the Prime Minister, who of course is not named, because again, I looked it up, and the Prime Minister of Britain at the time this book was published was Wilson, and he did not have Dalmatians, let alone, again, one by the name of Cadpig. I'm not British, so the name Cadpig sounds funny for a dog or any other living thing. But again, great stories. Highly recommend them. I found the 101 Dalmatians at my local library in ebook form, as well as I've been buying the Starlight Barking, which was relatively cheap. I do not believe these are out of copyright yet, but again, the property is owned, at least the movies and stuff are owned by Disney. So, but again, the book rights are probably going to release at some point, and they own the franchise for the film, so that's a kind of a different thing. So, but again, dog crazy kids, Dalmatian crazy kids, animal nuts would absolutely love this book. So they're probably both books are probably great to read at night. So that is it for this review. I will link links to both 101 Dalmatians and the Starlight barking below. If you like this review, you're welcome to check out. I have a bunch of other reviews. Like and subscribe. Thank you.